Betsy O'Brien.
Emily Craig.
And we are working at the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture this year. And so just to provide a little background, we've got the mission and vision of the Burke Museum up here, which I will dramatically read aloud. The Burke Museum creates a better understanding of the world and our place in it. The museum is responsible for Washington State collections of natural and cultural heritage and sharing the knowledge that makes them meaningful. The Burke welcomes a broad and diverse audience and provides a community gathering place that nurtures lifelong learning and encourages respect, responsibility, and reflection. And the vision that goes along with that is that the Burke Museum inspires people to value their connection with all life and act accordingly. And this is important because this sort of guides everything, all the programming and all of the exhibits that go on at the Burke, including Burke Family Days, which is what we are looking at for this evaluation. So Burke Family Days are a suite of 5 family-focused events held every year at the Burke Museum. These are Bug Blast, Archaeology Day, Meet the Mammals, Dino Day, and Mushroom Mania. And these events feature family-centered activities that give visitors a chance to interact closely with museum collections as well as experts in the field. And all of these days are free with admission. We are also we're working closely with Julia Swan, the Burke's Public Relations and Outreach Coordinator, who is interested in how visitors are interacting with the Family Day communications materials, which are intended to effectively represent the opportunities available at Family Day events, as well as align with visitors' expectations and experiences at these events. So in looking at some of the communications materials, as well as in some discussions with Julia, we identified a few key elements or activities that are available at these Family Day events, and that is to see real specimens and touch real specimens. They're also over here. Listen to an expert, talk with an expert, make something, try something new, and learn something new. And these were things that are evident in the activities as well as in the information that is put out about these events. So as you'll see later, we used these to develop our instruments.
So, where are we coming from here? We spent the first part of the quarter going back and forth a little bit about what exactly we were going to be examining in this study, and what it really boiled down to is that the literature on what people expect from a museum or informal learning experience and what people think is really cool about them is something that's been really well validated in a lot of literature. So we didn't want to kind of recover that ground. So 2 aspects to our literature review that speak to that, and then speak to this more narrow set of evaluation goals. Is a body of people talking about the fact that effective communications and effectively serving an audience really means paying attention to what their needs and interests and expectations are. So there are a couple of, the Kotler article that we really keyed on to is actually a piece from Museum News. So it's not a super academic piece, but he really lays out a strong framework of what museum marketing specifically can do in service to audiences. And then the Deering article is sort of a typology arguing that museums often look at audiences as strangers, people who just sort of happen to wander in the door, or guests, so like you might have house guests where they're welcome, but let's play by our rules. And then the method that she really argues for, in contrast to those, is to treat visitors as clients, to be really responsive and receptive to what they're interested in getting out of their visit. So that's sort of the communication side framework that we wanted to operate under with this study. And then looking at expectations and interest points within visits, the Carrick et al. Article that we looked at actually builds on that previous one and creates a really specific, really well-validated framework of the types of experiences that people find satisfying when they do go to a museum or an informal learning experience. And these I have written down because there are many frameworks here that we want to talk about. So those satisfying experiences are most often object-centered, cognitive in some way, so some kind of learning or thinking about something. introspective, so some sort of reflection or restoration or something that's going on within the person, or social experiences. You know, I came to spend time with my family, or to connect with this friend I haven't seen in a while. And then some other research, Packer and Valentine, were all sort of a set of progressions that all built on these ideas of visitors as guests, and then taking for granted that people have a specific sets of activities that they find very satisfying. So these last 3 articles here that we looked at most closely, they all dealt with identifying motivations for why people come. So things like, I want to learn, I want to have fun. These are not super surprising, but again, they're things that have been validated in research that we wanted to build off of. And then more specifically in another one of these articles, some different elements that people identify as being part of a learning for fun experience is the way they quoted in the article, and the specific benefits that visitors report after a visit, which are often things, again, that are internal, introspective, restorative aspects, but then also psychological well-being, some kind of personal growth, some kind of learning experience within that, and then subjective well-being. It's like, I felt good, I was happy during my, you know, that's a benefit, that's a legitimate thing. So those are all things from an existing body of research that we knew we could build on in order to focus more closely on our evaluation goals. So the 2 things we wanted to do with this study that don't retread the ground of satisfaction or expectations too much, or to narrow specifically to how expectations and experiences, sort of how those things look in light of the communication strategy that's built around these events. So we're interested in doing 2 things for the Burke with this project. First of all, creating sort of a profile of who these people are that are coming to Burke Family Days, and really identifying demographic information and family composition, and then also how they're coming in the door. What aspects of that communication strategy are the things that are really salient for people, whether it's what brings them to the Burke Family Day or what brings them to family events in general. Where are they looking for that information? And then a second goal, not secondary, but in addition to that, is we're really interested in what we can define as those specific expectations and experiences at Burke Family Days, with sort of the existing validated frameworks I mentioned before as a basis for building them, but also sort of merging them with the specific, you know, the verbs that we know the Burke is using, the activities that we know are embedded in all of those events, and that we know that the folks who are doing the programs find important, otherwise they wouldn't be putting them on. So we're interested in seeing how visitors' expectations of the event, presumably based at least in part on that communication strategy, align with the things that they've actually done during their visit. And we're interested in identifying what visitors report as the most important aspects of their time at the Family Day event, and if there's anything that they can articulate as being particularly unique or special, or something that really resonates about a family event that they can't do elsewhere. So those are the things that our data hopefully is going to be able to say, and in a little bit Betsy will be talking about getting from what we can say to what it might mean.
All right, as Nick said, we are operating under a somewhat different timeline than every other group. So our project actually started in September, about 10 days before school started. So we did initial observations at Bug Blast, which was basically the 3 of us standing there looking at all these kids going, whoa, what in the world have we gotten ourselves into? But sort of looking at the event and seeing how what we were taking away from that event could be used sort of aligned with what the Burke suggested in the proposal, and what they were looking for, and how we could get to those results. And in October, we finally sat down, we went to the Randy Korn workshop, we sat down, and we came up with the evaluation goals, which sort of turned all the work we had done before that on its head, and we had to come up with new instruments and new research and do more reading. And then at Archaeology Day on October 17th, we pilot tested 7 different instruments, 4 versions of an entry survey and 3 different exit interviews, which was quite chaotic since we were the 3 people doing that pilot testing. 7 instruments, 3 people, not the best balance of work. But we had to do all of that because in November we had to finalize our instruments and the evaluation plan so that we could start collecting data at Meet the Mammals, which we did on November 20th. We stood outside in the freezing cold, and some of you were very helpful in doing that, so thank you. And so we have, like Nick said, already started collecting our data, and we have 2 more data collection days, but we plan on coding our data beginning in January and February because Mushroom Mania is in May, about a week before we're planning to go to AAM and during thesis time and everything, so we can't wait until all of our data has been collected to do the coding and the analysis. So actually, our use of first year or introductory students is a little bit different. We think we'll probably be using them to help us look at the data and code the data. We only have 1 data collection day during winter quarter, so we're using those students to do more coding and less actual data collection. And then we'll move on to analysis and data reporting actually a little bit before we collect that Mushroom Mania data, so we'll start drawing our conclusions, and hopefully on May 15th they won't all be blown out of the water. And then again, we're presenting our findings here in Seattle in June and hopefully in Chicago at BSA in July. So like I mentioned briefly, we have 3 data collection days. We've already gone through 1 of them. We have Dino Day in March and Mushroom Mania in May. Artifact ID Day in February was on our list of data collection days for a while, but after conversations with Julia and amongst ourselves, as we developed our instruments, although Artifact ID Day is an annual event for the Burke, it isn't actually specifically targeted to a family audience, and it's a different experience. Instead of the Burke bringing out their collections for people to see in ways that they wouldn't normally, visitors are invited to bring their own artifacts into the museum, and so therefore, of course they're going to touch real specimens, and of course they're going to talk to people. That's why they're coming. It's a very specific reason why they're coming to the museum. So since it didn't, as much as we wanted a larger pool of data collection days, this really didn't fit within the framework, and it wasn't worth it for us to stand there and collect data for an afternoon when, in the end, it didn't align with anything else we were doing. So we settled on 3 days, and we're just going to keep the focus squarely on family days.
Alright, so now we get to talk about methodology. Our audience for this study is all adult visitors attending a Burke Baby Day. They are our potential audience. We chose adults because they are the decision makers. They are the ones who are, they make the decision to come to the museum, to bring their kids, they drive there, they pay to get in. Because part of this evaluation is looking at what is bringing people to these events, it was important for us to determine what is making the adults choose to bring their kids. Maybe their children, but the adult is who we are targeting. So visitors may be asked to complete a survey upon entry, an exit interview, or both. If visitors do complete both the entry survey and the post-interview, this data will not be paired in any way. Both are confidential, and we have no information collected that will in any way connect that one person has done this and this to compare that information. So for both the survey and the interview, the selection of participants will be random, and sample size will vary between events as the event attendance varies, but the sampling method will remain constant. So our ideal sample size for the 3 events in total, which we will be collecting data at, which is Meet the Mammals, Dino Day, and Mushroom Mania, we're looking for a total of 300 surveys and 100 interviews. And because we have actually already started our data collection, you can see that at Meet the Mammals, we collected 96 surveys and 34 interviews, which is roughly a third of what we are looking for, so we are confident that our goals can be reached. This is not to say, however, that we will stop collecting data if we reach 300 surveys and 100 interviews, the data collection will remain constant for all 3 events, according to theirs. Our sampling methods, we will be using convenience sampling methods for both the entry survey and the exit interview. For the entry survey, we'll have 2 data collectors. We will have 2 data collectors who will be collecting surveys from the incoming visitors. So they will approach the first adult to reach the top of the Burke's front stairs or ramp from every other group. And so that the way that's been working out is the data collector will have the survey and will approach from the beginning the first group, adult to cross the line in any group, and have them fill out the survey, and then once that is done, they will wait, and then they will get not the next adult from the next group to come up, but the group following that, the next first adult in that group. Does that make sense? It's complex, but specific. So, and for our exit interviews, the data collector will, upon completion of an interview, which includes putting all the data into the iPad after the visitor has left and uploading it, will approach the next person to exit the doors. We have 2 different data collectors with different whiteboards and iPads located at the front entrance and at the cafe doors to try and reach everywhere people are going. That was something we discovered at pilot testing. People do not just leave through the front doors. That was important to note. Pass it over to Emily.
Okay, so let me grab my visual aids. We do have a couple. I know it's kind of difficult to see, so if anyone wants to see this survey a little closer, we don't have a lot of them, but we did bring a couple copies. So if you guys want to see them, like Betsy said, we have 2 instruments: a pre-survey or a pre-visit survey, and then the exit interview. So on the pre-survey, it's completed prior to entering the museum. It's completed with paper and pencils, so we have clipboards and pencils available for the visitors. And it's broken into 2 parts that are visibly broken into 2 parts. The first is how they heard about the Family Day event. And we want to also know how they hear about other family events in the area so that we can identify places that visitors look for information that may or may not be currently used by the Burke. That's also where we ask about membership and if they've been to the Burke before, so sort of that background information. And the second part is about the visitor and the group that they come in. Most of the information about the group that they come in is the age of the other people in the group, but we get a little bit more detailed information about the visitor so that we can address that first evaluation goal of getting a picture of who comes to Family Day events. And then our second instrument is the exit interview, which is a little more in-depth. So our exit interview involves 2 parts. The first part, well, 3 parts, I'm sorry. The first part is some basic demographic information, including how they found out about the event and how many people are in their group. And then we move into our grid activities. So each exit interviewer has this grid and magnets, and we ask people to answer the question today, did anyone in your group first expect to do those things? And those are again built off of those keywords that we identified from the Burke. And then if they actually did those things, so they use the magnets, and as my lovely piano light is showing, they use the magnets to indicate what they expected to do and then what they actually did once they were inside. And then once they've done that, we ask them to prioritize. So they've identified everything they expected to do, and the dry erase marker is, oh no it is, it's right here. And then they use a dry erase marker to indicate, well, this was, when we were thinking about coming, this was the most important thing. This was what we thought we were going to be able to do. And so they rank those. We ask them to rank up to 3, but they do not have to indicate 3. And then they do the same thing in the category of what they actually did. So what were, when we're asking that question, it's a little bit more about the standout activities. What was it that they just really loved about what they were able to do inside? And they can identify, again, up to 3. For both their completion of actually filling out the grid and their prioritization of the things they did. We're recording the information on the iPad. And so the visitor themselves are never actually using the iPad. It's something that only the data collectors are using. We don't hand these out to just anyone. And so we're collecting all of our information on here. It gives us a really easy way to keep everything in one place and to record what they're actually telling us instead of just what we're hearing them say, and we're not getting just keywords, but actually what they're telling us. And then we have once the visitor left, as Betsy alluded to, we have the ability to fill out what they expected to do and what they did, and then how they prioritized things. And then we have one final open-ended question on the instrument, which is what makes Burke Family Day different than other family activities. So getting at what they might think makes the event special. And if they can't articulate anything, if they don't come up with anything, that's okay. We're not forcing them to give us an answer. At Meet the Mammals, we had several people say, well, I don't know, or, well, everything I did here I could do elsewhere. And that's fine. They're more than welcome to say that. But we also had a lot of people say, give specific reasons why they came, be it the ability to talk to people, or that they can touch things, they get to see their kids interact with things. So we have a lot of really good information, but we aren't forcing them. We're not like, no, you need to give us an answer, like what makes this good. So, moving on to possible applications.
All right, so given what we are collecting, I'm not awkwardly standing there, guys. We think there are a bunch of different uses for the information that's been gathered. So some possible applications for this data is it could be compared to the communication strategy to determine whether the communications materials are generating the anticipated expectations. The museum can also use the data to look at who the current audience is, as well as maybe identify who is not coming to these events and perhaps target these audiences. I think already I've been surprised by some of who the audience is that's coming. I've interviewed several people who came as just adults who are interested and really enjoyed themselves. The data will also provide insight into where people are hearing about the events, where they look for these types of events, what communications efforts are successful and what might not be working, so that the information could help in streamlining future communications efforts. Also, in identifying some of the most valued experiences that visitors are having, this data could also serve to inform future communication strategies by perhaps highlighting some of these events and these experiences. And although this is an evaluation sort of the audience and not of the program itself, we think that the programming department might be interested in these experiences that people highlight as being of particular value to them and be able to use those in future programming efforts.
So that in a nutshell is what we're going to be doing. We wanted to spend just a second to close out talking about kind of the bigger picture that this evaluation fits into, and some things that we're pretty excited about that are sort of the why now, why this type of work. So as I think most of us in this room know, the work is getting ready to embark on a multi-year visibility campaign, and so we have kind of been thinking of this study and framing the study for ourselves as something that will give a baseline of kind of the more quantitative side of that, of as I mentioned before, who the visitors are for this one particular suite of events as kind of a starting point for that sort of work in a more comprehensive way. Because family groups are one of the group's key audiences that they've articulated, so it's a good starting point in that respect. But also for ourselves as students and as participants in the interaction program, we're really excited that this is the third iteration of evaluation that the Burke is doing. And we might be reading too much into this, but the more we think about it, the more we're really excited that we feel like taking the leap beyond exhibit evaluation or specific circumscribed project evaluation to do something that really is looking at an audience and at who visitors are in a way that could be made more broadly applicable is a really exciting thing, and it's kind of to us, on the outside, it looks like a big step for the Burke, so we're really psyched to be a part of that. And to possibly imbue it with some significance that you know, there's something in the institution, there's something in the culture of the Burke that is getting more and more excited to see what's going on with the people that are great. That's sort of the context for this piece.
I just want to point something out that I realized listening to all of the other presentations. We started our project earlier than everyone else, but we're also finishing it later because everyone else is collecting data January through March, and our last data collection day is in May. So guys, we did a great job choosing. I just realized that today.
I was just wondering if you've, so far in your data collection, if you've got a sense of how many people coming to Family Estates knew ahead of time versus wandered in.
We haven't gone over all of it, and so we all have like sort of our own snapshot of what we've looked at.
Okay, so maybe let me rephrase that. Are you finding a lot of people just wandered in?
No.
Okay.
Because that is, some people did, but that actually where they found out about it is the one piece of information, because the communications department uses that relatively quickly. That's the one thing that we have looked through, and most people were at least aware of it. There were a few people who did the pre-surveys that weren't aware of the event, that found out about it when they got there, and there were a few people, because of sampling, that came for something other than the event. There are, I mean, the museum's still open, but the majority of people were aware that the event was taking place.
Speaking as the programming department, it's great. It's fantastic. I have a question, and I was all like, tell us! And I went, oh no, that's not what this presentation is. You're going to tell us at the end. You're sharing what's happening. But are you going to be able to, are you keeping the data separate so that you'll be able to see what you got from each of the different days, so that you can sort of
In the on both the survey and the interview, we have a place to mark what event it was collected at.
So but it'll be in a data format.
Yeah. So hopefully, because that's one aspect of the coding we'll be using, we'll be able to do an analysis of it group apart, but then also we have the option to aggregate everything and see if there are bigger trends across them.
So if we wanted to tailor our marketing in the future to Mushroom Mania, which I suspect is slightly different sense of audience, we could do that.
For the interviews, are you actually recording people's voices using the iPad?
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Do they know that?
Yes.
Okay.
Before we record, we asked them if that's okay.
Have you had a chance to see how that actually works, and is it pretty accurate at catching all the words and
It's
details?
remarkably good quality audio. I think our biggest issues so far have been trouble uploading because of the cold, and
iPads
trouble,
don't like the cold. It's something we learned.
and also trouble with other ambient noise. But I don't think anything we've listened to so far has been inaudible.
And actually, Meet the Mammals was a really interesting test case for the iPad and the audio, because there was an air compressor outside that was being used by one of the inside stations. We didn't realize that when we set up at the top of the ramp, and so every so often this air compressor would go on, and you could hear it in the background, but you, for the most part, can still hear and understand what the visitors are saying, and it wasn't as if we were holding the iPad directly in front of their mouth really awkward. We said we're going to record you, but we tried to just still hold the iPad naturally so that they didn't feel uncomfortable.
It's a remarkably good microphone in the iPad.
Is it transcribed for you as well?
We mentioned using the first year students to work on coding.
Also, I don't know if you guys know that we're getting the software Dragon fly or whatever that is that takes.
Dragon Naturally Speaking.
Yeah. So that lets you take, for the oral history class, which you guys may also want to use, that lets you take, so Julie, you know about it? What
Yeah, it takes a lot of training. Unless it's probably a better iteration than when I last used it, but it takes a lot of training.
I use it at home, and I think it has gotten better. The challenge is that it gets better at recognizing one person's voice. Like it's better every time I use it, but with multiple voices, it's challenging. One thing I thought about doing is actually listening in one ear and then repeating it on the other.
So it hears your
so it understands my voice, but still, I mean, it is getting better all the time. Each iteration in terms of how little editing you have to do. So it's great that you guys are trying out that iPad. So fabulous.
I don't have a question, but I just have to say you guys have done a fantastic job. It's been a pleasure to work with you. And thank you for taking something on that was such a stretch of your academic schedule. And I think you're totally spot on with your final set of observations about kind of where the museum is as a whole and really starting to take visitor studies a little more seriously, and there's definitely interest in it. So you're right.
Excellent.
It's a nice wrap up.